Good morning, everyone. This is the live broadcast of a special edition of the TWIS podcast, and I am very excited to be here today. As always, remember that you can subscribe to us on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the places that podcasts are found. Look for This Week in Science. Our website is twis.org. I'm Dr. Kiki, and this next half hour, it may be edited for the podcast, but what you're going to see is the full, unfiltered, unedited live stream. So I'm glad that you might be here with us live now. Without any further ado, this is TWIS with a special science interview recorded on Friday, October 22nd, 2021. Happy Day of Science, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Science. Thank you for joining us. We have a wonderful show ahead. Today, I am speaking with Dr. Sidarta Ribeiro, who is a Brazilian neuroscientist, science communicator, and deputy director of the Brain Institute at Universidade Federal de Rio Grande do Norte. I do not speak Portuguese, and I know I am probably not pronouncing any of this correctly. My accents are atrocious. Dr. Ribeiro has written one of the most comprehensive books on the history and science of dreams, Oracle of Night. And without any further ado, I'd love to welcome him to the show. Dr. Ribeiro, thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning to everyone at home, at office. It's a pleasure to be here.
Right off the bat, we're talking about the science, the culture, the history of dreams. What did you dream last night? Anything interesting?
It's interesting. I had a dream of a little metal car that was going through over my body. And this is because of an experience I had with my younger son a few days ago. So I could recognize this element. Now, what it really means, I haven't had the time to interpret it today.
And as a neuroscientist, how do you approach the interpretation of dreams? I know that historically we have approached them, and in your book you cover this very comprehensively, the history of how we have. But how do you come to interpret dreams at this point in time?
Well, so for, in the antiquity and throughout the Middle Ages and to this day, among several indigenous populations, people believed in the past that dreams can predict the future. And science has come to see this as superstition. So in the past 100 years, this has fallen in disgrace, and people have focused on the physiological properties of sleep and what it does to your body. And then we started to learn in the past 20 years that, in fact, actually, we started to learn over the past 100 years, but with a lot of good evidence in the past 20 years, that in fact, the brain is really processing a lot of memories and changing the way that we represent the world and changing the way in which we can cope with the world, and actually giving a good reason to believe that our ancestors evolved an oracle, but not a deterministic oracle that really could predict the future, but rather a probabilistic oracle. So a simulation of possible futures, of counterfactuals, of things that may happen, and the simulation gives you some insights into how to behave in order to be more fit in the environment, to adapt to the environment. This is a notion that converges a lot of data from neuroscience and psychology, and agrees, it's aligned with knowledge from several traditions that have roots in the prehistory of men and women. So I think we need to look into dreaming as something very important for our evolution and something that needs to be rescued.
What do you mean by rescued?
Well, sleep and dreaming are in peril. We're constantly
Are we talking about? Yeah, are we talking about all the people who through COVID have said, I can't sleep, I'm stressed out, I have anxiety, people who are taking sleep aids to help them sleep? Is this what you mean?
Yes, we're living a very unhealthy life. We pay no attention to sleep and dreaming. We pay little attention to nutrition and exercise, most people. And when those things are not aligned, it's almost impossible to stabilize. and people start taking drugs to go to sleep and then to wake up and then to do this and then to do that, and they're not doing the basics, they're not doing the homework. And a good night of sleep is the main first thing you should do, right? If you have a good night of sleep, you will basically clean your body of all those toxins that we generate during the waking life. We also build a lot of molecules that we need, proteins, and release hormones, many important things. We'll do this triage of memories, the separation of what's to be kept, what's to be forgotten, what's to be changed and restructured to generate creativity. And then on top of that, we have this more complex level of simulation of behaviors, and with a lot of social implications. So yes, I think especially because of the pandemic, we're dealing with collective trauma, and dreams have been a way, and shared dreams and shared dreams for the common good have been, something that our ancestors relied upon over ages and ages and ages, and this worked for them, and it worked for us, therefore, right? Yeah. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. And somehow we are in need of going back to those basics, if we are to heal as a society, as a planet.
What does neuroscience and the research that you've done tell us about those shared dreams? There were reports of very common threads for the dreams that people have had throughout the pandemic, especially during lockdown. And then historically, we also have the flying dreams or falling dreams, or waking up in front of your class, having to give a presentation and you're not wearing any clothes. These are common elements to dreams that people have reported. Is this something that we can match in any way to activity in the brain?
Well, dreams evolved for a purpose. Dreams evolved with a function, and perhaps with many functions related to survival. The pandemic put us in a situation in which everybody was reminded of the fear of death, of impending death, and then the death of people that we love. So it's really a tragedy. And it's something that happened before, many, many times in the past of humankind. But of course, it never happened with such a global scale.
Yeah.
So the fact that dreams appeared, that nightmares, for example, appeared all over the world with similar motives, is not surprising at all if we know something about archetypes and about common motives in culture. It's easy to understand how common fear will elicit common images. Right. Now, what this does to your brain is something that we know indirectly, mostly from animal models, right? We know that when you have a very strong negative memory that can generate a trauma, nightmares, recursive nightmares will ensue. And in the brain, this will mean the creation of a very strong memory that in the beginning will be basically an electrical memory reverberating through several brain circuits, such as the hippocampus, the cerebral cortex, the amygdala. And eventually this activity will subside and will give rise to morphological changes at the level of synapses, changes in the way they are modeled and remodeled. And then we can keep memories for a long period of time. In the case of those memories that are acquired with such strong emotional value, we tend to not get rid of them without some help.
Right. And in the book, you talk a lot about the difference between slow wave and slow wave sleep and rapid eye movement, and these different parts of sleep and how they contribute not just to dreams, but also to that remodeling process. Can you talk about what we understand now?
Absolutely. Well, across the night, we go through several sleep cycles that comprise different sleep stages. The main stages are slow wave sleep and REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, right? Slow wave sleep, as the name says, is dominated by brain waves in the cerebral cortex that have very large amplitude and very, very low frequency. So they're very big waves that will promote a periodic activation and inactivation of neurons. So neurons will burst, but in between the bursts, there will be silence. And in this silence, there's no opportunity for a cohesive conscious experience to occur. So if you wake people up during this stage, people will say, well, I'm not dreaming of anything. Perhaps they have some thoughts related to like regular chores, but nothing like a a movie or cinematographic
Right.
experience. So this is the first half of the night. The second half of the night, though, is dominated by REM sleep, when the cortex becomes super active, and then dreams can occur. But these dreams will not just be the product of the reactivation of neurons, therefore the reactivation of memories, but also they will be the product, or will be guided or oriented by specific desires and fears, which are signaled among many other mechanisms through dopamine. So basically, depending on what you are aiming in your life and depending on what your problems are, this is what will set the direction for the dream. Now, if you have many different problems, which is the case for most of us in contemporary societies, your dream will become a mix of things, and often not really easy to be interpreted. But if you have a very clear concern, a very serious thing going on in your life, then your dreams, if you pay attention to your dreams, they will really, really condense in images, sometimes metaphorical, sometimes very literal, what is going on in your life.
And does this activation of the different neurons, it's dopamine, is triggering all this? What happens? So a standard mantra of neuroscience is neurons that fire together, wire together. So is it during this rapid, fast eye movement that we have the increased firing and so increased wiring and so hardening of memories within our neural architecture?
Yeah, this is a very good question. It is during REM sleep that many molecular mechanisms of long-term memory consolidation will be triggered, such as the phosphorylation of kinases, and then immediate early gene expression, and then late genes being expressed hours and days later, that will transform those short-lived memories into long-term memories. So this is, yes, correct. And also it is during REM sleep that the process of migration of memories within the brain will be promoted. So memories do not stay in the same place. They're constantly moving. You may remember the same person over decades, but you probably not using the same neurons at all, right? So you're using different networks that keep changing. And REM sleep has a lot to do with that. Now, more recent studies, such as the work of Wenbiao Gan at NYU, have shown that during slow wave sleep, there's the addition of many small synaptic connections. So basically like wiring everybody. And then during REM sleep, most of those get eliminated and some of those get enriched. So this is more like a selection step. So at the beginning, you basically mutate everything, connect everything, and then later select. And by doing that and implementing those Hebbian principles of that govern plasticity, then basically what the system is doing is looking for optimal solutions, which is what adaptation is all about.
And this process, it really mirrors a lot of like the brain development that occurs in individuals, where we start out with all sorts of neurons and then things get pruned back. So you have the optimal neural connections to allow you to respond to situations effectively. It seems like it really mirrors that process.
Yes. And I think now this is really inspiring people doing computation. This is inspiring machine learning.
It strikes me, the idea that you mentioned about the long-term memory aspect of remembering somebody over several decades. And back when I started grad school in a neuroscience, neurophysiology program, it was the idea, we didn't understand how NMDA receptors were involved in long-term memory. We didn't understand how long-term memories continued to be propagated. So how do these neurons exist? How long? And this idea that you said, that long-term memories don't necessarily exist within a single neural network for 10 years, for your entire life, that they're getting shifted between networks. That to me is an amazing advancement in our understanding. When did we come to start understanding this idea?
Well, we know since the 1940s that parts of the brain that are necessary for us to learn something new, say in the declarative realm, the name of a person or the recollection of an event, so namely the hippocampus, that if you lack a hippocampus, you cannot learn new things, right? To
Right.
become amnesic from then on. At the time, it was noted that the famous patient HM that became the most famous example of this kind of condition was also a person that had lost the memories that preceded the surgery. So the memories that had just been acquired were erased as well, but not the memories from childhood or adolescence. So it became understood over several decades that declarative memories require the hippocampus in order to be installed in the brain. But then over the course of days and weeks and months and years, they move to the cerebral cortex. Whether they move or they migrate or they propagate or they get anchored, several different words have been used, and they're all metaphors. We don't know exactly what's going on. Some research suggests that they always keep a foot in the hippocampus, that they always have a connection to the hippocampus, but it's no longer necessary to retrieve the memory. Okay, so we know that there's this overall disengagement of the hippocampus over time and overall engagement of the cortex over time. The first evidence that REM sleep could be related to that was published by myself in 2002 in the Journal of Neuroscience, showing that there were waves of immediate early gene expression related to, as you said before, NMDA receptor, calcium entry, and so on, that these waves would progress from the hippocampus to the cortex over time. And then over the years, different studies from my own group and from other groups started to establish that indeed there is a sleep-dependent process there that relates to memory migration, if you want to. Maybe it's a good word for it. But I think that what is remarkable, I think, if we take a distance and we think of what we learned in the past 100 years, is how neuroscience, with all the molecular and neurophysiological investigations that really characterized its advancements in the past decades, has converged on many things that were well understood at the end of the 19th, the beginning of the 20th century by people like Freud and Jung. So there's a convergence between neuroscience and depth psychology, which is remarkable. And I make a point in my book of going over them and giving the references and again showing, sharing with people what neuroscience and cognitive psychology have learned, knowingly or unknowingly, about those links.
I think, yeah, there is some amount of synchronicity in, looking at, I mean, we've seen this in science over and over again, talking with paleontologists who looked at morphology of fossils to place animals within the animal kingdom. And now they're looking at genetic evidence and they're digging deeper. And the genetic evidence is often mapping to what these relationships we previously thought they were. Although now we're getting new information. And so it seems like this is kind of what's happening between cognitive science and psychotherapy and modern neuroscience with these molecular techniques that we're using today.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So to keep going on this, I wanted to know also about the animal aspect of this. You've done animal research, but we're talking about this from a very human perspective, and our understanding of hippocampal involvement and brain activation very often is from these animal studies. So do we think that animals dream the same way that humans do, that perhaps they have these, if they are cognitively consciously aware of certain things, they're visually, a puma, a large cat, is a predator who potentially is after a deer. They're going to have these images in their head. Do we imagine that this is what they're dreaming as they dream?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but let's qualify that answer.
Okay.
Right? So all animals, pretty much all animals, from sponges up, have some sort of quiet sleep, some sort of quiescent state in which they don't move. Their bodies are, if they have color changes, they are not changing their colors. If they have whatever they normally do, they're not doing that. They're just very quiet with eyes closed and not unresponsive to the environment. Okay, so sleep is a very general thing in the animal kingdom. Active sleep, a form of sleep in which the nervous system is very active, but the body is quiescent, is restricted to a few groups, but this is increasing. In the beginning, we thought it was only in mammals, then birds, then reptiles when they are within a particular temperature range. But this is all vertebrates. But then recently,
it's hard
it was
to measure
shown,
a fish.
yes. But people have shown that they, to the extent that we know, they lack it. But
Okay.
we may be surprised soon. I mean, of course, yes, there's so much to do and so much we don't know. Among invertebrates, though, it has been shown in the cuttlefish. Recently, my lab showed it in the octopus. And then also there was a recent demonstration of active sleep in Drosophila, in the fruit fly. For what we know, these groups evolved, they're so distant in evolution that it is possible that active sleep evolved separately, perhaps twice or even 3 times in those groups, independently, probably reflecting a very strong selective pressure, right? But to answer your question, if we assume that these states are actually analogous and that they are concurrent with some subjective experience, such as what we consider dreaming, it's only among mammals that it lasts more than, let's say, a couple of minutes. In the octopus, for example, the episodes will last about 30 seconds, 40 seconds, sometimes a minute.
In the octopus, though, it's amazing to watch because they change colors, and the cuttlefish as well, don't
they? Change texture, they move their eyes, but they are unresponsive to stimulation. This is what we showed in this paper early this year.
Yeah.
So answering your question, what we call dreaming is probably something specific of mammals, because it's only in mammals that you'll see episodes lasting above half an hour, 40 minutes, up to an hour. In the platypus, above an hour. And then within 1 hour, you can really tell a story. You can really enact complex social behaviors and come and see the consequences of the actions that the dreamer undertakes.
Does the neural activity during this active state, during REM sleep, does it occur faster? Are we experiencing dreams at real time or in a faster synthesized brain time?
This was a question that people started to ask many decades ago. In the 70s, people believed that there was time compression. Some evidence in the 90s and in 2000s suggested some changes in temporal processing, even data coming from animal models. I don't think we have an answer to that. So studies with lucid dreaming. So when you become aware that you're dreaming, right, and then you acquire some control over your own actions in the dream and sometimes over the entire setting. When people do experiments under lucid dreaming, doing lucid dreaming, and they try to perform some tasks, if the tasks are easy, they seem to use the same amount of time that they would use in the waking life. But when the tasks are difficult, they seem to be slower. So it's probably based on the evidence that we have now, I think there's probably a continuity there, and there's a continuity also in imagination. We know, for example, from the work of Stephen Coslin in Harvard, that when you try to imagine something in detail, you have more activation of the brain, but it's also harder to do, right? So just like in waking life, what you do is the effort is proportional to the work.
That makes sense. It absolutely does. As we're getting to the end here, I want to come back to the book itself and your reason for writing it. This is like your life's work. This is everything from the science to the history to the art, our exploring our life through dreams and our brain through dreams. Why was it important for you to write this book?
Well, I didn't know I was going to be a sleep and dream researcher when I began PhD, but then after a few months, because of what happened to me, and I describe it in the book, I'm not going to give a spoiler, I decided to go in that direction. And this is my main thing to this day. I investigate things that are related to it, like psychedelics, and schizophrenia and so on. But this is my main thing. And I have personal reasons, which I also include in the book, that come from my childhood. But the book is really, it came from a vision that I had when I was in between the PhD and the postdoc. I finished my PhD in New York, and I had 6 months to begin my postdoc in North Carolina. And I had this feeling, because I had just written my thesis, I had this feeling that if I could just assemble all the information that existed, that was already available, that I could find in libraries, on the internet, about the different aspects, the different biological, psychological, anthropological, mythological, historical aspects regarding dreaming, I would be able to sort of tell the history of the human mind, the evolution of the human mind, using this thread. But I needed to assemble things in the right order. And I didn't have this knowledge, but I had this vision that I would be able to do it. And I decided to do it as a very relaxed project. So over the years, every time I stumbled upon something that belonged to this very long narrative that I wanted to build, I got it. I got that book. I got that video. I got that thoughts. I got that paper. So I started to, and of course, my laboratory. I went from being a postdoc to being a head of a laboratory, and I started doing my own to coordinate my own research in the directions that I wanted. And so it took 19 years to do that. But of course, at the very end, in the past 3 years, then it became a problem in my life. Then it was something that I needed to do on a constant basis. Otherwise, it wouldn't finish ever, because it's long.
Right. At a certain point, you're like, okay, this needs to actually happen. I need to go from data collecting to synthesizing.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it was a pleasure, and it was very emotional for me, because of course, you're talking about dreaming, you're talking about very introspective things. So I talked about myself as well. But in a way, I mean, it's centered in the science. It's actually a whole book to give a materialist explanation for this, for our relationship to dreams in history.
Which is, I think, a very important place to put it, because going back to where you started, dreams have played a part in our cultures throughout history and affected human history. And so it's this relationship between mind and culture and the reality that we construct through our actions, maybe because of our dreams sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. This is the point.
Yeah. I get it. I really get it. We do have a question. If you have a moment, there's a question from the chat room. What's the difference between acting on a dream or controlling a dream? You mentioned lucid dreaming. How I'm supposed to how can I train for it? How can you actually get into a mode to do the lucid dreaming?
Okay, so in several Eastern traditions, such as in yoga in India, called Nidra, Yoga Nidra, or in the case of Tibet, Yoga Milan, these are different names for the practice of controlling your dreams. And this can be achieved from within the dream, or from the waking state towards the dream. These things can be achieved in both ways, even though most people go from the dream towards that state. So they're like very old traditions of how to attain that. And then you have the New Age approach. The science of lucid dreaming really began in the late 70s, and to a large extent because of the work of Stephen LaBerge, then working with William Dement in UCLA. And since then, this was something that was on the fringe of neuroscience in the 80s, but now is at the very center. It's very hot, and people are studying it in different labs, in important labs, such as Giulio Tononi's lab and many others in the world. If you want to achieve lucid dreaming, you can do a variety of things. You can go towards waking up in the middle of the night, say at 4 a.m., and then mentalizing that you want to have a lucid dream, and then going towards your last REM episode of the night with this intention. You can have exercises during the day in which you ask yourself, am I dreaming? Am I dreaming? If you just create the habit of asking that, this will prompt the same question when you are dreaming. And then if you answer yes, then you need to control your excitement, otherwise you wake up. So it's like riding a bike. You need to equilibrate yourself, balance yourself between waking and going back to the oblivion of regular REM sleep. So if once you find the balance, then there's a path of testing your limits, of pushing the envelope, of finding what you can do. And it's one of the most exhilarating experiences in life, in my opinion. I mean, it's when I dream of flying, and when I dream of getting out of the Earth environments and into the universe, these are things that have been described many times in the human history, from Acadia in ancient Mesopotamia to the writings of Giordano Bruno. This is a very important experience that people should have and should pursue to expand their minds, to learn more about their own minds.
And in the book, you also propose keeping a dream journal, and that this is a good practice. Does that work? I mean, obviously, it would work very well with lucid dreaming, but how can keeping a dream journal be beneficial?
I think it helps with lucid dreaming, but it actually helps with much more, because it will give you like a map of your own situation. It will give you a variety of descriptions from several points of view of what's going on in your life. It may bring to the conscious mind what are our true desires, our true fears, our challenges, things that we are afraid of and that limit our perspectives. And we can also offer us a very good insight into what not to do and what to pursue. When I'm in a period in which I keep a dream diary in a consistent manner, I realize that it's not just that one dream can be interpreted and make sense, but when I have them all together, like a series of dreams, it's like really having many, many pieces of the puzzle. And then you start to say, so these things that are so difficult for me, whatever, in my life, with my family, or my work, or whatever it is, there is a solution, or there's something I should definitely not do, because it's coming from within, which sort of it's a very sophisticated form of intuition.
And what do you hope people take from this book, and that if people who read it, what they learn and gain from it?
Well, I hope that people that read this book will be inspired to protect their sleep, to guard their sleep, to protect their dream, to cherish it, to make it a topic of conversation in your family, to bring the consideration of your dreams into your own life, into give importance to it, because this is something that all our ancestors did, with the exception of those in the past 500 years in the Eurocentric world. And one thing I've been contending, I have a piece that was just published in Time magazine in which I just make this point, that perhaps the problems that we're facing in the 21st century, in which there's the paradox of having so much technological advancements, so many technological means, and so little hope of really solving the problems of the majority of the people in the world. Perhaps this is coming from the abandonment of dreaming. And if we look into the example of our ancestors that were able to dream collectively and share their dreams and share their desires and share their fears and build communities, I think we are in urgent need of a collective dream of shared common good. If we can find that balance, then the 21st century may end with a very beautiful garden full of happy people, performing what they want to perform, doing what they want to do, and enjoying the benefits of the accumulation of culture, of capital, of all sorts of technological capital, of cultural capital that we produced. Right now, the situation is 800 million people starving and counting, increasing, and less than 3,000 billionaires in the world getting richer and richer and richer. This must be a misunderstanding. This must be some sort of, we are not imagining properly the consequences of our actions. And dreaming may help us do just that.
Thank you so much for your time today. It's just been a joy speaking with you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Everyone, the book is Oracle of Night, Sidarta Ribeiro. And I do hope that you head out to, I guess, your local bookstore or your Kindle, whichever works for you. There's also an audiobook. How many languages is this book in?
It's now in Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, English, and soon French and Russian and so on.
Wonderful. So it will hopefully have an effect on everyone around the world. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this episode of This Week in Science. We'll be back again Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Pacific time for more science discussion.